Hi, welcome to Surviving Life Today. Whether this is a podcast, blog, journal, whatever it is, what we focus on here is how we're all surviving life. I'm your host, Kelly McFarland. I'm an anthropologist, researcher, farmer, small business owner, crafter, and baker, and a mom. And I'm here to talk about how we are all surviving life and how we can craft a better future. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. This recording is going to be directly focused on food, on the food system, and on a possible pathway to making the local food system in North Texas a little bit stronger. So before I really talk about the idea, I want to say that this idea for a food distributor that is retail facing is essentially what the idea is, linked to a food lab. So it's a food hub, essentially. But this idea isn't the be all end all solution. Obviously, for a local food system, we need an entire system. And so there's many great ideas out there, and I don't want to impact those in any negative manner. I know that in Dallas there is a real big push right now to develop a food policy, and restorative farms and other strong food leaders are doing a lot to make change. And so I don't want to say that this is instead of, this is in addition to. Right? So my idea here is from the past 10 years of research that I have done into the local food system in North Texas, and interactions around innovation with students, interactions with innovation with farmers, with food producers. That's really all I ever talk about. So this business idea is born from all of that. So right now in industrial food, it's really just probably, I don't even know how many main corporations, probably about 5 main corporations, maybe less, that own all of food. I can put a little graphic here maybe and show you the food web, but you can just go ahead and Google the food web if you like, and that will show you how all of these corporations are linked. The problem with all of these corporations being linked in this manner is that our options around food aren't truly options, right? So you think that you're choosing a different brand instead of this one, or a different product instead of this one, but actually it all leads to the same source. So that if there's a problem in that, there's not much that we can do. For instance, at last count, I'm trying to think, probably about 3 years ago I looked, and there were 4 meat processors in the United States for all of the meat that we eat. They all go through these 4 different corporations that are running things. So depending on those corporations' standards and on the oversight and all of that, which by the way, we don't have oversight right now very much because the administration in charge has gotten rid of a lot of the food oversight. So we're kind of at the mercy of the machine. And in capitalism, let me remind you that it is all about making money. So if you can find a way to, let's say, put filler in food so that a little bit of food becomes a lot more food, that is seen as an advantage by companies that are selling nutritious products for people to eat, right? So when you kind of take a step back from the industrial food model and consider the goals of the enterprises that are working within industrial food, you can see that it is very much capitalistic centered as opposed to nutritious and access, right? And so my interests as an anthropologist really are around food systems, right? So I've studied a lot of different food systems. France has a pretty cool one. And also access and nutrition, right? So how do we understand access? How do we understand nutrition? And just views of nutrition. Like when I started growing my own food, I was a little bit afraid to eat food that I grew by myself. And that is actually thinking about socially. We've been socialized to believe that the safest food is coming from the grocery store. So me questioning food that I watched grow on a vine, that I'm the one who grew it, is by design. And so I don't know. Anyway, so I'm getting off topic. All of these things are things that we have to think about with the food system. But then what is the possibility for a solution? So working with all of the farmers in that I had interviewed for my thesis research, which are North Texas local food farmers. I think it was a total of 17 farmers from 13 farms or 14 farms that I had interviewed. And one of the main things that I found with them was a struggle, was selling the food that they had created, right? Because industrial food, actually, for you to be a farmer that sells into industrial food, you kind of like you make promises for the future in order to make the agreement, and then if you can't follow through with the food that you're supply for the future, you become in debt to the distributor or the processor above you, right? So the actual way that it works in order to get into industrial food is a little bit of like a predatory Ponzi scheme type situation where there's people who actually are afraid of losing their farms if they don't get a harvest. And so this leads to a lot of practices that might not be desirable, right? So in local food, a lot of the farmers are not able to sell into industrial food because they don't have the money to farm as intensively or maintain organic standards in order to farm in that manner. A lot of the farmers in local food are also not on the books organic because being organic certified actually also costs a lot of money. So they are Texas grown and Texas something certified. But if we kind of look at, the numbers, the numbers I have in front of me are from 5 years ago, but the population boom until 2020, right? And so from 1997 to 2020, the DFW area, the area of North Texas where I live, has exploded in population with a 60% growth. And then the market value of land has also increased to 305% the cost of what it used to be, right? So these are numbers from Texas Land Trends, which I will link in the description. And you can go ahead and check the numbers in your area if you are in Texas. But this population boom has led to an abundance, right? So we're not looking at this with a scarcity mindset. We're looking at this with the fact that we have an abundant population of food, possibly producers, possibly distributors or people to work in the food system, but more importantly, food consumers, right? And so this massive population of food consumers has a lot of money that can go into the local economy. But you have to have a place that is created to host this level of consumers, right? So when I was thinking about this idea, I was traveling around different places in the United States, and one place that I saw that came to mind for an idea for a setup was Reading Station in Pennsylvania. And Reading Station is an old train station that has been changed into a food hub. And I think it's been on the Food Network. I'll try and find some pictures to link. But in Reading Station, there's so many vendors, like aisles and aisles of food vendors who are actually restaurants, or they make chocolate, or they have coffee for sale, or they have all these other things. But it's an actual building that they are within. And they have some form of a lease agreement with Reading Station to operate their 10 by 10 food establishment, right? Like, or bigger than 10 by 10. But you know what I'm saying is they have a lease on their property within this large food hub. And through doing that, for the consumer, you can walk through Reading Station and essentially find any different kind of food that you want to eat, pick and choose from many different ones, and then they have a food area where you can consume that food. So this idea for food vendors, it's actually not new. Like Anthony Bourdain said a long time ago, the future of food is food vendors. When you think about how the cost of a lease, it can all of a sudden explode, or the cost of building or starting a brick and mortar can make it so that people can't get into the food system. Having a place that has a food hall with all of these different vendors makes it more accessible for people to enter into the food system, right? So the idea is to create this food hub and call it Locally Yours. Locally Yours, the idea even behind the name of the food hub is that when people are traveling and they're looking for somewhere local to eat, they will search for local food establishments. So this kind of puts the name into the entity so that you could potentially have Locally Yours Dallas, Locally Yours Denton, Locally Yours Fort Worth, Locally Yours in Texas, and then Locally Yours outside of Texas. And now we're starting to build a network, and we're starting to have the option for ethical food trade, right? So I think ethical in the manner that we're not wasting a ton of money by shipping food everywhere when we have the food here. So you begin local and branch out. So in this manner, ethics is like the wisest decision, right? So the retail side would bridge the gap between local producers and consumers and serve as a brick and mortar housing establishment for all of this. On top of having restaurants in different vendor booths let me talk about this for a minute. So on top of having these restaurants and everything like that, Locally Yours could also be a grocery. And in becoming a grocery, you are now having a place for local food farmers to sell their harvest to be resold without them having to go stand at a farmer's market, without them having to stop working on the farm and spend a day in sales, without them having to worry about not making sales of this harvest, which will cause them to go out of business and never be farmers again. Okay, so these are the things that I saw happening to local food producers that cause them to not be able to stay within the local food system. And so having a place that serves as a grocer that will grow or that will sell their harvest or produce their harvest into a shelf stable or a refrigerated food item is a possibility for growing more farmers in the system, right? So on one hand, you need the farmers, right? They have to exist. But on the other hand, if the farmers don't have somewhere where they can sell their harvest, they will go out of business. And so we need to create a link in the middle of this. And so the idea behind Locally Yours is largely to create this link. Okay. So local grocer for local goods and foods, right? So there's the possibility if Locally Yours had the investment and space, there's also the possibility to start investing in local craft, local furniture makers, local people who are here who have extreme talents in making all of this, or possibly, a lifetime of experience that don't have a brick and mortar place to sell it anymore and want that, right? So this type of a situation, you could have local goods on top of local foods, right? The restaurant businesses that would be there, if restaurants want to grow further past Locally Yours could actually work with banks to create a record of this restaurant's sales, this restaurant's growth, all of those things, so that the restaurant can one day get a grant or a loan to open a brick and mortar establishment, right? So we're growing businesses by having vendor stalls where these businesses can grow further. But we're also like the vendor stalls, the grocer, right? So you have like these different one-stop shop, right? So that was a big reason why in my research, a lot of consumers do not go to the farmer's market or different farm-based grocers because it doesn't count as a one-stop shop. So you have to start thinking about how can you make it so that the consumers are coming to visit and spending a lot of time there, right? If you haven't noticed, grocery stores will actually change where their products are located within the grocery store pretty much every quarter, so that people will spend more time walking around the grocery store so that they will spend more money. So having somewhere that is a one-stop shop is kind of an important part of the design. Not only does this have the opportunity to help farmers in having a place to bring their harvest, and in restaurants in generating a history of sales, but also by having Locally Yours, it can bring in food producers and food processors who have ideas or maybe have family recipes for how to make fresh foods into shelf stable foods, but they do not have an entry into the market. And so that brings in the idea of the other side of Locally Yours. So not only is Locally Yours a food hall on the one side with retail facing restaurants, grocers, and local goods. But then also on the other side of things, this is an incubation type situation, right? So Locally Yours on, like, imagine two different sides. And on this side of the business is retail facing. On this side of the business is business growing. And so this is an incubation think tank type situation. So on the incubation side of Locally Yours, this is focused on beginning new businesses and business growth. So one of the big things that I've seen in my research in the area is that there are just different pieces in the local food system that are missing. One of those things is butchers. In the North Texas food system, there actually are not very many local butchers people who are growing livestock or meat type animals. Well, animals that are destined for consumption in meat, not hair and dairy or whatever. But they have a very hard time finding butchers who will process the meat. And so considering the option for a collab, you could actually have butcher licensing courses. Like, we could create a whole program here, y'all. Like, we can make it work. And so having an area for workshops, having an area to train future food producers and stuff like that, having an option there on site to take your food manager's license test, which also, maybe there needs to be some sort of a scholarship program for people to access food managers license tests. But all of these different ways to collaborate within the local system to make our local system stronger. And so who hosts the collab side? So this is where we need entities to work together. On the retail side, I could see that as really growing into an employee-owned type situation where the people who run it own it. But on the collab type side, this is where we really need to create collaborations, not just with farmers, but also, hospitals, governments, colleges. All of these different entities can have a say in how the collab side can work. And so that's because, like I said, with like butcher lessons, right? So if you're teaching people to be butchers, what are the government standards that we need to teach to, and how can we create a licensing program? So you want to work with government entities, cities, things like that in order to shore up the possible problems with this idea, right? On top of that, grant funding, block funding, those types of funding from the government are more accessible with collaborations. So if you get a city and a hospital and a college all working together, you're more likely to get the massive grant that you're going to need to start something like Locally Yours. Because, like, honestly, when you think about it, like just taking kind of a few steps back for this entire idea, it's millions of dollars in investment that it would require to open something like Locally Yours. But it's billions of dollars in return, right? So it's not looking right now, we're looking into the future and how can we build a system that is actually going to work. So it's not looking at right now and like all of this money is a big upfront investment, but we're actually looking like down the line for the consumer's benefit. So we would be building a system that does have the possibility to, like rake in money, right? Like you can, I think in what I have described just so far, you can see how this could run with the retail component to bring in quite a bit of money. But then you also have this ability now, because you have the collab incubation side, an ability to have different entities within the local community working together to make a more healthy public. Okay. And so the collab is really important to have as many different, cities, colleges, hospitals, not just one, but many of them on board and interested in not only like hearing the ideas and giving feedback, but also maybe even proposing their own ideas for how we could continue to grow and strengthen the local food system. On top of all of that, you could have an area, if you have butcher classes, you're going to have an area to process animals. So if you have on the collaboration incubation side of things, a commercial kitchen where food can be processed, this actually opens up that idea for food producers to come look at the harvest, figure out how they can make shelf stable products, and begin to experiment with different shelf-stable recipes for the sales of that. This would also require a lot of contracts and things like that, because the food producers, ideally, you would see two different avenues to where if they would want to produce food that would stay within Locally Yours, so it's Locally Yours branded chips or Locally Yours branded sweet potatoes or whatever, or if they would want to hold on to their own brand. And so, Aunt May's sweet potato chips, or whatever. Thank you, Spider-Man. But just these different avenues for people to be able to grow business. Okay. So not just keeping it within Locally Yours' umbrella, but having this option to grow enterprises. And that, I think, is why collaboration to begin with by so many entities is really important, because we're not looking for Locally Yours to be the one center leader. Instead, we are taking an approach where everybody has ownership and everybody then has investment to do better. Okay, like this is all not just from a business standpoint, but from a strategic planning for the future standpoint. These types of considerations really need to come into it. So with these workshop rooms that you could have for, if somebody's a food producer, they're going to make something from a fresh food into a shelf-stable product, which is called value added or added value product. Or you could have the place for the people to take lessons, like as a butcher. In all of this, you could generate social media channels, right? And so if you were to record just like making cool food or whatever and have social media channels where people watch it, that is another area of possible revenue and marketing to bring people in to want to visit. Okay, so ideally, if some of these workshop rooms even had windows into the retail side, right? So like imagine going to Disney and watching somebody make candy canes or watching somebody make chocolate at a really big mall where they have like the chocolatiers and stuff, right? So having those workshop rooms with windows where people could watch them make those products, or you could record and post those things, is another way to market and create buy-in around the Locally Yours idea. So that is kind of the main idea for Locally Yours. I have been skating around this idea for the past 5 years, really. I know that it is a good one because I keep coming back to it and I keep proposing this in different avenues, and people come to me and they're interested and they want to get on board and they want to write about like, how could we make this happen? This idea itself, Locally Yours, I know is an insanely great idea. And it is built from research and innovation. It is built from research into the local food system, knowing the farmers, really evaluating all of the different entities that are out there that are hosting local food or that are helping to promote the local food system, and thinking about what do we need, like what do we really need in order to see a big change. And so I believe Locally Yours is a fantastic idea to make a big change, and I just kind of wanted to record it and put it out there for everyone if you get the option to see. So what do you think? Do you think that we could pursue this type of an idea? Do you think there's a way to begin small and scale up? Because I have been thinking about that for really years, is how I could start this myself. I do truly believe that the Locally Yours idea would change the local food system in North Texas for the better. And I do believe the Locally Yours idea is something that can be scaled and something that can revolutionize how food is maintained in the United States. There's a lot of different solutions. I think one of the main barriers is that a lot of people just don't have the money to start up. But I do believe that the food system can be changed, and I think that if we work together on something like Locally Yours, that we could do it. So please let me know what you think. Subscribe, hype me up. I probably have more of these little videos to make, but for right now, whatever you do in life, I hope that you are surviving and thriving, and I will see you next time.